Good evening, friends. So we will continue tonight with where we started last week, the Sutra of Vimalakirti. And all of you had access to the recording from last week, as well as access to PDFs, or your own copy of the sutra. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it on your own. I'm just sort of skimming the surface. But just by way of helping us recollect, it begins in this very special pleasure garden that was donated to the Buddha and his students. There's a great assembly of tens of thousands of enlightened beings of all types, of every different class, including human beings. And all the qualities of the enlightened mind and of enlightened people is elucidated in the beginning of this, and we get a sense that these are exceptional beings. This is what it looks like to be a highly developed person, a bodhisattva. And then, there were some miracles with various kinds of parasols that went on there, because this was an incredibly unimaginable gathering, not only of the enlightened beings, but also in this very magical universe that was unfolding in the garden. And then there were these young Lichavis, came out from the town of Vasily to inquire of the Buddha. And they, very interestingly, inquired, how does a bodhisattva, how does one enter a Buddha field, but how does a bodhisattva purify a Buddha field? And this is a very important teaching for us, because what is revealed by the Buddha is these Buddha fields are fields of sentient beings, people just like us. This is the field in which the enlightened being labors, and this is the field in which enlightened beings do their best to create a Buddha field by awakening as many people within that field as they can. Just like a farmer, hopes to grow as much within their land of delicious fruits and vegetables, etc. Not a lot of weeds. And so, and then he explains that the way we enter the Buddha field of a Buddha is by practice. And he again elucidates all the various practices, and you can read it, that we do, but that every time, in whatever field of practice we are engaged in, every time we purify the actions of our body, speech, and mind in that field, we are entering the Buddha field. So it's not like we just all of a sudden get there one day. One day I'm gonna wake up and I'll have achieved the Buddha field and everything will be good after that. But no, we are constantly, throughout the day, throughout our life, through the actions of our body, speech, and mind, either entering the field of the Buddhas, field of the awakened ones, field of all the characteristics and qualities of the mind that are attributed to our awakened pure mind, or we're not. We're entering Mara's field, right? The force of delusion. So he elucidates that, and then of course after, and then we know poor Sariputra, he sort of challenges the Buddha, even though we find out the Buddha made him say it by his ESP, special powers. He says, well, if it's true that an enlightened being creates a Buddha field, and you've been here laboring in this field for a long time, why does it still look, basically saying, why is it still filled with such deluded beings, and why is it still a mess? He's sort of blaming the Buddha. And so the Buddha, through his miraculous powers, understands, what Sariputra's getting at, and I think the voice of the chakra, or with the Brahma, one of the Brahma gods, basically chastises Sariputra for his misperception, not seeing clearly, and with his big toe touching the earth, all of a sudden the Buddha field of this world that we live in, the Saha world, is revealed. And for a moment, Sariputra sees that this world of thorns and all kinds of impure things is actually pure, totally pure. And so he gets sort of a brief introduction to the true nature of mind, and really the introduction to the Buddha's teaching that when the mind is purified, everything appears pure. Even what we would, because to call things pure and impure, or good or bad, or right or wrong, as it says in the verses on trusted mind, is a disease of the mind. Essentially, in our true mind, our pure mind, our uncontaminated mind, it is just like a mirror. It simply reflects what is. It's like a glass that just does not distort in any way. But it's our minds that distort. It's our perceptions and our projections that distort. And so this is where it begins. So it's interesting. So it begins in this, this pleasure garden, this assembly of all these enlightened beings, dwelling on only enlightened topics, and having all these miraculous experience of the jewel-like nature of this world. And then the second chapter introduces us to Vimalakirti, who lives nearby in the city of Vasily. We might say he's urban. Right? I mean, we've been in the beautiful pleasure garden with all the bodhisattvas, but Vimalakirti, he's urban. He dwells in the city, and he is a human being. He is a layman. He's not a great bodhisattva. He's not one of the classifications of all kinds of spiritual beings, and he's not an ordained monk or non-follower of the Buddha. He is a layman, and we are introduced to him in this chapter, and he is, just somebody totally involved in every aspect of lay life, from being married and having children, to being a businessman, to being active in every sphere of his community, as a businessman would, and also he also frequents places where proper businessmen don't. He hangs out on the byways of the town and talks to who's ever there, and he goes into places of ill repute. And yet, this chapter is called The Inconceivable Skill in Liberative Technique, which is upaya, which is skillful means. That no matter where he goes, no matter what unfolds in his household or lay life, he is never bound by any of it. Because every sphere of activity he enters, from the most mundane to the most altruistic, his intention is always to do good. It's always to do good. It's always to help suffering beings. And it's always to really, without probably, he's not evangelical, he's not a proselytizer, but in a very human way, he's always seeking to free people from all the places they're caught, all the places they are snagged by their delusion. He only has one purpose, and that is to benefit beings. So he is our protagonist, Vimalakirti, and as I said last week, since this is the only Buddhist sutra in which the protagonist is an historical layperson, it was especially loved in those traditions. Now the drama really begins. So Vimalakirti, even though he's an enlightened being, truly, manifesting as an ordinary person, he manifests sickness. He's sick in bed, right? And then we are told, this is just a drama, that he thinks to himself, here I am sick in bed. How come my good friend Shakyamuni hasn't come to see me, hasn't come to call on me? We've probably laid in bed thinking, how come someone isn't calling? But again, this is to set up the drama. So the Buddha, Shakyamuni, through his omniscience, is aware of that Vimalakirti is sick and that he's seeking visitation. So the Buddha probably, he has things to do, so he therefore begins to invite his key disciples. And these key disciples are well known in the Buddhist lexicon. In many suttas, they are present, and they are always, these are the most developed and senior of his monastic disciples. So he begins with Sariputra and says to Sariputra, please go to Vimalakirti and just find out how he's doing. I just want to know how he's doing. And then this Sariputra says, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase, I'm reluctant to go. Why? And now he tells his story. Why is he reluctant to face Vimalakirti? Right? Because one day I was sitting under a tree, absorbed in meditation, and all of a sudden Vimalakirti came to the tree and said to me, Sariputra, this is not the way to, I'm just paraphrasing, to meditate. So can you believe it? I mean, Vimalakirti is a layman. He's telling the senior disciple of the Buddha, this is not, who's sitting there probably in perfect equanimity under this tree. This is not how we meditate. Confidence. Courage in his own understanding. And wanting to help Sariputra. So this is not like a put down, right? This is not like, besting him. Did you know what I'm saying? This is, in the Zen tradition, there's something called Zen combat, which is, where in the meditation hall with teachers or among students, people would ask tough questions, right? And again, the purpose is not to show somebody up or show that you're more enlightened than them or smarter than them. It's really to, test people's understanding. So this is very much in certain traditions. So he says, this is not the way to meditate. To meditate, neither body or mind should appear anywhere in the triple world. The triple world is the world of, we could say past, present, and future. We could say it's the world of desire, non-desire, and formlessness. But he's basically saying that true meditation is free of all concepts, free of any kind of criteria, is totally, it rests in just pure state of awareness without even any awareness that one's aware. You should absorb yourself in meditation in such a way that you can manifest all ordinary behavior without forsaking cessation. So for those who are familiar with Dzogchen and Zen, there's something familiar about this, right? So here he's saying, most of us, we very much divide up. This is my formal meditation, and this is my everyday practice. This is my mind state on the cushion, and this is my mind state when I'm in daily life, right? And he says, no. You should be able to have the same mind state as you move through your day, as you participate in all activities. You should never be separate from this fundamental awareness and knowing and wisdom of your mind. Okay? He said, so we can learn from this. He's saying, meditation is not about sitting still. Sariputa's sitting still. He looks probably quite beautiful. You probably go by and go, wow, he's beautiful. Look how calm, radiates peacefulness. Right? And Vimalakirti goes, no, that's not meditation. He's just in a state. He's in a deep meditative state. But real meditation, it's the same under the tree and, outside the tree, or in the restaurant, or at home, or when walking about. It's the same mind state. That's true meditation. Manifest the nature of an ordinary person without abandoning your cultivated spiritual nature. In a mind that neither settles within nor moves without toward external forms. This is a very deep state of meditation and a very developed practice where you can sit, and even though there are sounds, even though there are sights, the mind allows them to arise but doesn't go toward them or grab at them. In the same way, one has internal, so to speak, thoughts, feelings, perceptions arise, sensations in the body arise, and all that, and one doesn't move toward them. Again, it's that just vast, open, spacious mind that just allows things without, discriminating between inner and outer, that doesn't move away from just being aware. And you can see that kind of practice, that kind of deep practice, and meditative practice is certainly a wonderful practice for lay people, because most of us don't spend our days sitting under trees, do we? Immovable. We are moving about the world. And so Vimalakirti is saying, this is the way that we should practice. So then at the end he says, Reverend Sariputta, those who absorb themselves in meditation in such a way are declared by the Lord, meaning the Buddha, to be truly absorbed in contemplation. Sariputta said, Buddha, Lord, when I heard this teaching, I could not reply, and I remained silent. So therefore, I don't want to go talk to him again. He bows out. He had a taste of Vimalakirti once. He knows. There's a saying. Going in the presence of a teacher is going into the lion's den. I don't know if you ever heard that expression. The lion's den, which means, if you go in the lion's den, don't expect to have a peaceful time, right? So, he's saying, I've already dealt with this character. I don't want to have to deal with him again, right? So then the Buddha goes to another one of his great disciples, Moggallana, and he says, and there he was one day in a town square in Vasali, teaching lay people, and all of a sudden Vimalakirti comes along and says, Reverend Sir, this is not the way to teach the Dharma to householders. Right? Can you see where he's at? Right? Just challenges him. Right? Here he is, a great senior disciple, And he goes, no, this is not how you teach lay people. The Dharma must be taught according to reality. Really beautiful. Right? In other words, and you'll see as he develops, and again, I'll try to go through this without touching everything. In other words, the Dharma shouldn't be taught like from the point of view of, like it's a Dharma to be taught. And he goes through it. He says, the Dharma must be taught according to reality. It is free of all concepts. It is without personalities. It is free from all desire. It's free of words and letters. It is inexpressible. He just goes on, and it permeates all things, and blah, 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 blah. So he says that after going through all the things that the Dharma isn't, he said, how could there be a teaching in regard to such a Dharma? This is quite interesting, right? So we know the Buddha has been teaching this thing called the Dharma, right? For decades, right? The Dharma is all these body of teachings. And there is the great disciple in the main square teaching a whole assemblage of lay people the Buddha's Dharma. And along comes Vimalakirti and he says, no, there's no Buddha Dharma. There's no teaching to transmit, right? The Dharma is beyond that. It is an understanding. It is a knowing. It's a base of understanding the nature of reality. And from that place, one helps people. One teaches people. Not from some idea of a dharma. Now, for most people, just kind of getting a good working sense of the dharma conceptually and being able to share that is a step forward and can be helpful to people. But you can see, so please understand, Vimalakirti is dealing with the top people of the Buddha Sangha and trying to help them, right? So here's Modigliana, this great teacher, doing what he thinks he's supposed to do, and all of a sudden, Vimalakirti just pulls out the rug. No. No, you're teaching the Dharma. No, don't teach the Dharma. Right? Teach the nature of reality to these people. So Reverend, he says, even the expression to teach the Dharma is presumptuous. And those who listen to it, and those who listen to it listen to presumption. No, he says, there are no presumptuous words, there is no teacher of the Dharma, no one to listen, no one to understand, as if an illusory person were there to teach illusory people. Now, we may take offense at being called an illusory person, being taught by an illusory teacher. But he's saying again, when we interact with the world, even in the most intimate way, we're always interacting from concepts, from a sense, I know this person's a man or a woman, or they're such and such and such and such, or they're such and such and such and such, or they're not such and such and such and such, right? We're always labeling and putting everybody into various kinds of baskets, right? Including ourselves as a teacher. And so he's inviting Modigliana, let go of all that. Let go of all that. Right? Have no concept about anything, even including the Dharma, or including that you're a teacher and that you're teaching anybody. Let go of all that and just be what? Present. Anybody hear about just being present? Yeah. Just be present. And trust, right, that all your decades and years of practice and learning will come through in response to the situation, right? Therefore, you should teach the Dharma by keeping your mind like this. And then he says, this is how you should teach the Dharma. You should be adept in regard to the spiritual faculties of living beings. This is called upaya, or skillful means, and really is one of the hallmarks of the Buddha. He taught for 49, 50 years, and he taught all kinds of people. And if you read his teachings in a thorough way, you will see contradictions. It'll be confusing, because he'll give one teaching to this person over here, and then he'll give a totally different teaching over there. And this teaching that he go over here to somebody else, he says, no, that's not a teaching. He'll give him another teaching. And you'll go, well, what is it? Is he confused? No. He's teaching to the capabilities and the faculties of the person or the people that he's talking to. He's not teaching from a concept. He's not teaching from an idea. He's not teaching from a cookie-cutter dharma. Do you understand? You should be adept in regard to the spiritual faculties of living beings. How can you be adept to the spiritual faculties of living beings? You have to be present, totally present, 100% present. Right? And it's good advice for the way we show up in all our relationships. Be 100% present. And don't see the person as a concept. Now, a lot of times, a concept means, we see somebody, and let's say we have history with them, so we see them in the present in terms of our history, right? So we're not seeing them purely at all. We're seeing them through this filter, through this image that we've created in our mind of who they are. So this notion of being skillfulness, even though he's teaching this now to these great monks who are teaching in the Buddhist tradition, it really is good advice for all of us. Just be totally present to whoever you're with, see them fresh and new just as they are, and as we say in our tradition, listen deeply. Listen deeply means what? Under the superficial. Don't just hear the words. Listen to what's behind the words, what's under the words. Right? Don't just be taken in by how somebody's trying to present or the impression they're trying to make or whatever. See deeply into them. So by means of correct vision of the wisdom eye, manifesting great compassion, acknowledging the benevolent activity of the Buddha, purifying your intentions, understanding the definitive expressions of the Dharma, you should teach the Dharma in order that the continuity of the three jewels may never be interrupted. Good advice. Having correct vision, I like that, of the wisdom eye. Correct vision. 20/20 vision of your wisdom eye. Manifesting great compassion. Manifesting, acknowledging the benevolent activity of the Buddha. Make sure your intentions are always pure. Understanding the definitive expressions, which means the true teachings of the Dharma as something to live, then teach. In that way, the continuity of the Buddha Dharma Sangha will continue in this world. And so when Vimalakirti had done that, all the 800 householders that were listening to his talk all conceived of the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment, but I myself was speechless. He couldn't answer him. So he said, I'm reluctant to go. And then along comes, and then he turns to Mahakashapa, another one of his great disciples, and says, okay, Mashapa, could you go? And again, now he says he's reluctant to go. Why? Because one day he was in the street of the poor, begging for food, right? So we know that it was the custom, right, of the Buddhas. They didn't keep food, right? Every day they had to kind of earn their keep. So they go into whatever town or village that they would near, and they would beg, right? So this was on an early morning begging round, and I was in the street of the poor begging my food. And along comes Vimalakirti and says to Mahakashapa, to avoid the houses of the wealthy and to favor the houses of the poor, this is partiality in benevolence. Very interesting, eh? Reverend Mahakashapa, you should dwell on the fact of the equality of all things, and you should seek alms with consideration for all living beings at all times. You should enter everyone's home as if entering the family of the Buddha. When you enter a town, you should keep in mind its actual voidness. Yet you should proceed through it in order to develop all beings. You should smell, you should see form like a man blind from birth, hear sounds as if they were echoes, smell scents as if they were winds, experience taste without any discrimination. So what's he saying? So we could guess that Makashapa, being a renunciate, rather than going to the homes of wealthy people who would imagine give much better food, right? Mahakashapa, being a great ascetic, he's going to go to the homes of the poor people who probably, didn't have much to give. Maybe they give a little rice or, very poor quality of food. And I think he's thinking that Mahakashapa probably thinks he's really quite the guy. He's the real thing, right? Because he'll beg from the poorest of the poor. And Vimalakirti says, no. The vow to benefit all living beings has no partiality. This is very important. The view of the Bodhisattva is everyone suffers from delusion, right? The rich suffer and the poor suffer, right? We know that from a certain side we can distinguish, but he says, you're a monk. You've renounced that. When you enter the village, you should be there to benefit everyone without discrimination, right? You should go to every home, anybody's home, first home you come to, without picking and choosing. Another reference to the verses on trust and mind. It's very profound, because it is this view of equality that does not have partiality. For those of us in the way of the Bodhisattva, intensive, we know this view is a very difficult view. Right, because in the worldly view, there are those, there are perpetrators, and there are victims. Right? There are those who have advantage, and those who have disadvantage. And that's true, in a worldly sense. But what we don't see is it's all insubstantial. Today's perpetrator was last year's victim. Right? Today's ally of us in a war, was last war's enemy. Right? Now we love them, now we hate them. Now we love them, now we hate them, right? Now they're the victim, now they're the perpetrator. Isn't this what's going on? Big picture. And so what Vimalakirti is saying is, see the big picture. They're all caught in this, right? Is that true? Yeah. It's hard for us to admit, but it's true. And so the message of the Buddha is to help liberate beings, all beings, from this entrapment in this endless exchange of roles. Right? The good guy becomes the bad guy. The bad guy becomes the good guy. The enemy becomes the friend. The friend becomes the enemy. Right? The victim becomes the perpetrator. Perpetrator becomes the victim. Is that true? We need to reflect on this. So that's so anyhow, he's yeah. So that was Mahakashapa. Oh no, that was Subhuti. That was Subhuti. So we have a few. Oh, here's another one. Upali. Upali was another one of the great disciples of the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "Okay, Upali, your turn. You're up." Everybody else has bombed out on me, so now it's up to you, Upali. And Upali says, "Lord, I'm indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. One day, there were two monks who had committed some infraction and were too ashamed to appear before you. So they came to me and said, 'Reverend Upali, we both committed an infraction, but we're ashamed to appear before the Buddha. Can you remove our anxieties by absolving us of these infractions?'" Sound good? Upali's a senior monastic. They're a little ashamed before the Buddha, so they're asking, they're coming to Upali. He's safer. Can you help us? So there I was, giving these two monks a religious discourse. I'm sure it was a fine religious discourse. And guess who shows up? Vimalakirti. You know there's going to be trouble. You can see by now, uh-oh, look who's coming. No escape. And he said to me, "Reverend Upali, do not aggravate further the sins of these two monks." Right? So Upali thinks he's giving a nice Dharma discourse to ease their stuff, and the Buddha is basically saying, you're just making it worse. Can you really relieve their remorse? And then he says an incredible thing. He basically says, and sin is a translation. Usually in Buddhism, they don't talk about sin because it's a different kind of way of looking at, these unskillful actions that cause suffering to ourselves and others. So he says, but here they translate it as sin, which is probably somewhat accurate to our lexicon. Sin is not to be apprehended within or without or between the two. And why is that? Because the Buddha has said, living beings are afflicted by passions of thought, and they are purified by the purification of thought. Okay. So rather than giving a religious discourse on right action, on wrong action, on remorse, on confession, on aspiration, on, you know what I'm saying, looking deeply, which is where most of us would go, Vimalakirti says, you're just keeping the waters muddy. So he's saying, since their affliction is in their mind, it is through the purification of their mind that the remorse they feel for their actions will truly be removed, not by finding an antidote or understanding. And then he says something that's for those who have done, understand something about the Buddha's wisdom path, the heart of perfect wisdom, etc. Reverend Upali, the mind is neither within nor without, nor can it be apprehended between the two. Sin is the same as mind. And all things are just the same as sin. They do not escape this reality. Reverend Upali, this nature of mind by virtue of which your mind, Reverend, is liberated, does it ever become afflicted? No. Therefore, the minds of all living beings have that same nature. All delusive passions consist merely of conceptualization. And these conceptualizations ultimately have no existence. They're just imaginary fabrications. To know that is to touch the purity of the intrinsic nature of mind. Misapprehensions are passions. The ultimate absence of misapprehension is the intrinsic nature of mind. Anyhow, this is deep stuff. And this is really where you can see that all these non-dual teachings that we find in the various meditative traditions are all being stated here. So what is he saying? So think about, your latest and greatest misdeed. Okay. One that you have remorse for. Okay, just close your eyes and think of it. Okay. And you have remorse. Now, how do you purify the mind of that quote-unquote sin that led you to act, speak in a certain way? Now look directly in your mind. Does that sin, in this case that unskillful action of body, speech, and mind, does it exist as a real thing in your mind? When you look directly into your mind, do you see any trace of any of that? When you look directly at the thoughts that make up your conceptualization of that deed, does that thought have any intrinsic reality? When you look right at it, what is the nature of a thought? And is the nature of a good thought different than the nature of a bad thought? So this is what he's saying. This is the way to purify the mind. Not by giving a Dharma talk, but by helping someone see that the nature of their mind is intrinsically pure, and that sinful thoughts and altruistic thoughts both have the same nature. And when you rest in that same nature, understand that same nature, that's how you purify your mind. So, again, Vimalakirti is always coming from this non-dual place. The absence of self is the intrinsic nature of the mind. Reverend Upali, all things are without production, destruction, duration, like magic illusions, clouds and lightning. All things are evanescent, not remaining even for an instant. All things are like dreams, hallucination, unreal visions, like reflection of the moon in the water, like a mirror image. All things are born of mental construction. Those who know this are called the true upholders of the discipline. And those who are disciplined in this way are indeed well disciplined. Upali was like in charge of discipline within the Buddha's order. So you can see Vimalakirti's understanding of how to deal with sin, misdeeds of body, speech, and mind is quite profound, which is simply to, see the innate nature of your own mind and see whatever thought form you constructed has no permanence. It's like he says, like a bubble, like a mirage. When you see that, it's very easy to what? Let it go. And come back to the basic purity of your mind. When you rest in the purity of your mind, you don't do those kinds of things. You only do those kinds of things if what? If you believe in the solidity of self, if you believe in the solidity of others, if you believe in the permanence and solidity of your thoughts, of your memories, of your, But this basic way of understanding that Vimalakirti lives in and is always trying to help, right, is much more profound. So that is the third chapter. All right? So first the Buddha kind of goes through all his big guns in his monastic disciples, right? None of them will go. So now the Buddha's going to go for his really big guns, the bodhisattvas, right? The highly enlightened beings that make up his entourage. Okay? So let me just read some of them. So there's one of them who's called Prabhavayuha. And the Buddha says, you go to Vimalakirti and you inquire about his illness. Guess what the Bodhisattva Prabhavayuha said? Lord, I'm reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? One day, Vimalakirti, he's always on his game. So this great bodhisattva is going into town, and who does he see coming down the street? Vimalakirti, trouble. He greeted me, and then I address him. Householder, where do you come from? This is very Zen. Right? Okay? Because you make a statement that, like, where do you come from? Where do you come from is a kind of, like, to know where you come from, this is about space and time, right? And to, if I said to you, like tonight, where did you come from? You would have to what? Generate a thought. An imaginary thought about where you came from, right? Wherever you came from, you're not there, are you? You're right here. So you have to make up a story about, well, I came from home. You see, that's like in the historical dimension. But we know Vimalakirti doesn't hang out there. So there he goes. So there's this great bodhisattva, and he says, oh, where do you come from? And then I said to him, the bodhisattva says to him, oh, where are you coming from, Vimalakirti? That's how it begins. So the bodhisattva starts it. And Vimalakirti says, I come from the seat of enlightenment. Next time somebody asks you where you come from, try that out. Or you could say, I come from nowhere. Well, where are you going? I'm going nowhere. I'm just here. Which is the truth. I'm just here. But most of the case we go, oh, I'm coming from there. We'd have to, So he says, I come from the seat of enlightenment. See, this is like Dharma combat. He's putting down, if you understand what's going on here. I come from the seat of enlightenment. Now, of course, the bodhisattva goes, all right, what do you mean by this, the seat of enlightenment? Do you think there's such a place as the seat of enlightenment? Special seat somewhere? No. And then Vimalakirti said to him, noble son, the seat of enlightenment is the seat of positive thought, because it is without artificiality. It is the seat of effort because it releases energetic activities. It is the seat of high resolve because its insight is superior. It is the spirit of the great spirit of enlightenment. It does not neglect anything. It is the seat of generosity because it has no expectation of reward. It is the seat of morality because it fulfills all its commitments. It is the seat of tolerance because it is free of anger toward any living being. It is the seat of effort because it does not turn back. It is the seat of meditation because it generates fitness of mind. It is the seat of wisdom because it sees everything directly. It is the seat of love, because it is equal to all living beings. It is the seat of compassion, because it tolerates all injuries. It is the seat of joy, because it is joyfully devoted to the bliss of the Dharma. It is the seat of equanimity, because it abandons affection and aversion. What do you think? Quite an answer. Right? Just think if somebody answered you that way. But I mean, it's interesting. What would you do? Again, if it was somebody you respected, not just a street preacher or something, but all of a sudden they go, where are you coming from? I'm coming from the place of enlightenment. Where is that place? It's a seat of positive thought. There's no artificiality. Energetic activities, high resolve, the great spirit of enlightenment that doesn't neglect anything. It's a seat of generosity, expects no, you know what I'm saying? It's all there, isn't it? And he's telling him, this is where I come from. This is I come from a place of all these qualities of heart and mind. That's where I live. That's where I come from, that's where I stay, that's where I go. But most of us would go what? I came from my house. Oh, where's your house? Oh, it's on, 910 Lambright, just up around the corner. You see, we're enmeshed in the physical world, in the world of time and space and constructed names and labels. But we can see Vimalakirti doesn't live there, even though, of course, he has a home. We know he runs a business. You know what I mean? But if you just catch him directly, he tells you where he's really coming from. He's coming from his mind. He's coming from his heart. So that's, I think, very instructive to us, to ask ourselves, is that where I'm coming from? Or am I totally lost in identification with the world and the things of the world? I live here, I go there, I was born there, this is who I am. You see what I'm saying? How when we meet people and they ask you who you are, we tell them the story of who we are. But who we really are is who we are right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the real you, right now. So when somebody says, who are you? You meet them in the moment, fresh and pure as you are right now, without a story, without a set of beliefs, without all these identities that we carry. Can you feel the freedom in just being you, which is not defined? It's not a story. It's not an identity. That's freedom. And Vimalakirti is a free man. And he goes on and on. Vimalakirti goes on for, it's quite a statement. It is the seat of the conquest of all the devils, which means all the negative forces. It never flinches. It's the seat of the triple world, free of involvement. It is a seat of heroism, sounds a lion's roar, because it is free of fear and trembling. It is a seat of strength, fearlessness, and all the special qualities of the Buddha. It is irreproachable in all respects. Noble son. This is Vimalakirti addressing the Bodhisattva. Noble son, when bodhisattvas are thus endowed with the transcendence, the roots of virtue, the ability to develop living beings, and the incorporation of the holy Dharma, whether they lift up their feet or put them down, they all come from the seat of enlightenment. They come from the qualities of the Buddha, and they stand on the qualities of the Buddha. Lord, when Vimalakirti explained this teaching, 500 gods of men conceived the spirit of enlightenment, and I became speechless. Therefore, Lord, I'm reluctant to go to that good man and inquire about his illness. Whether they lift up their feet or put them down, they all come from the seat of enlightenment. They come from the qualities, the enlightened qualities of the awakened mind, and stand on those qualities. How many of us, just close your eyes, can say, yeah, I live, maybe not as purely, but I have some sense of what he's talking about. Is that where I really live? Do I know that's my home? Not my thoughts about the past, my thoughts about the future, my ideas about that, my ideas about this, my preferences, my likes, my dislikes, my fears. Or do I live in those qualities of mind? Is that where I dwell? Is that my reference point? Is that where I'm always trying to come from, to live from? It's very profound what Vimalakirti is saying. And here's another one. It's the Bodhisattva Jagatimdara. And it's a little long, but basically it involves Mara. Mara is the force of delusion, right? He kind of has his own realm, right? His own world, the realm of Mara. And it's a long story, and basically he shows up to kind of fool this guy. And he shows up with, how many did he show up? He shows up with 12,000 heavenly maidens. Just an ordinary day, for Mara. And he's trying to fool this other bodhisattva. And so Mara offers this pure being, this, I think he's a bodhisattva, a monk, he offers them these 10,000 maidens. Now, can this pure monk accept 10,000 maidens? No, right? So Mara said to me, accept these 12,000 divine maidens and make them your servants. And I replied, this is not Vimalakirti, he says, do not offer them, because I am religious, and I am the son of a Sakya. So these things are not appropriate. It's not proper for me to have these maidens, right? He has his what? His vows, his commitments, his status, right? No sooner had I said these words, than guess who showed up? Vimalakirti. Because Mara was pretending he was Indra the god, and he was fooling this guy. So that's why this guy was partaking of him. So all of a sudden Vimalakirti shows up and shows, this is not Indra. See, a lot of times we think somebody is not, they're really Mara, you see. They're really leading us down, wrong paths. But we don't see it, right? So Vimalakirti sees it and says, this is not Indra, this is Mara. Yeah, and these heavenly maidens aren't suitable for a religious devotee like you. Give them to me. Vimalakirti says, I'll take them. Mara was terrified and distressed, thinking that Vimalakirti had come to expose him because he was pretending he was the great god Indra. He tried to make himself invisible with all his magical powers, but he couldn't vanish from sight. Then a voice resounded in the sky, saying, Evil one, that's Mara, give these heavenly maidens to the good man Vimalakirti, and only then will you be able to return to your abode. Mara became even more frightened, and much against his will, he gave the maidens to Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti received them, and he says to them, now that you've been given to me by Mara, you should all conceive the spirit of unexcelled, perfect enlightenment. He then gave them a suitable discourse for their development toward enlightenment, and soon they all conceived the spirit of enlightenment. And he said to them, now that you've conceived the spirit of enlightenment, from now on, take joy in the pleasures of Dharma, and do not take joy in the pleasures of desire. And then these maidens ask him, what are the joys of pleasure in the Dharma? And then he goes through all these wonderful qualities. Unshakable faith, wishing to hear the Dharma, serving the Sangha, honoring spiritual benefactors without pride, joy of renunciation, not being fixated, anyhow, joy of always guarding the spirit of enlightenment, of helping living beings, always sharing through generosity, not slacking in morality. He basically goes through all the wonderful aspects of practice. These are how you find delight in the Dharma. So not by like taking delight in something called the Dharma, but in all these wonderful practices and living them and practicing them in relationship to beings. But then Mara said to the goddesses, all right, okay, you've heard enough. Now come along and come home with me to where we live. Remember, he brought them for. And they said to Mara, hold on a second. You gave us to this householder. Now we want to enjoy the delights of the Dharma, and we no longer want to enjoy the delights of desire with you. See, and Mara, is very tricky. So guess what he says to Vimalakirti? If this is so, if the Bodhisattva, the spiritual hero, has no mental attachment and gives away all their possessions, then, householder, please give me these goddesses, these maidens. It's very tricky, right? He says, well, since great bodhisattvas like you have no attachment and give everything away, please give me these maidens. And Vimalakirti says, I give them to you, Mara. Go home with your retinue. May you fulfill the religious aspiration of beings. And then the goddesses say to Vimalakirti, householder, how should we live in the abode of Maras? This is very interesting. See, when they came to him, they were under the spell of Mara, right? They lived to fulfill their desires, pleasure. And Vimalakirti gave them a different aspiration and a different vision of how to take pleasure, except it was in the Dharma, right? And so he's basically now saying to them, now that you have this, you can return to the abode of Mara. So listen to this, since he's really speaking to us, right? Because we can't go to an alternative universe, can we? Right? We can have our practice, we can study, we can have Dharma friends, we can come to the center, other things, but then we all, get up the next day and we're back in the world of Mara. Is that clear? And so he says, Vimalakirti says, sisters, he's talking to the maidens, there is a door of Dharma. It's called the inexhaustible lamp. What is it? A single lamp may light hundreds of thousands of lamps without being diminished. True? Likewise, sisters, a single bodhisattva may establish many hundreds of thousands of living beings in enlightenment without their mindfulness being diminished. In fact, it does not diminish, it actually grows stronger. Likewise, sisters, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to these virtuous qualities. This is the door of the Dharma called inexhaustible lamp. When you are living in the realm of Mara, inspire gods and goddesses or people with the spirit of enlightenment. In this way you will repay the kindness of all the Buddhas and become the benefactor of all beings. The goddesses bowed at the feet of Lachavi Vimalakirti and departed in the company of Mara. Therefore, Lord, I saw the supremacy of the power, wisdom, and eloquence of Vimalakirti, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man. Powerful, eh? Very powerful. You know, you would think, like, why is he giving them, after freeing them, right, from the clutches of Mara, right, the clutches of delusion, the clutches of that kind of superficial life devoted by pleasure, he's saved them from that life, right? And now Mara is saying, give them back to me. They're mine. And you're a bodhisattva. You're not attached to anything, so you shouldn't be attached to them. He's trying to manipulate them. But what a powerful vote of confidence when Vimalakirti says, no, sisters, you can go back. But when you go back, because of what you learned, and because of what you understand, you can help people. You can help people. Right? And in that way, and he says, it's like an inexhaustible lamp. It's not, some people think, if I do too much, I'll get exhausted. People think that way, If I'm too compassionate, too helpful, I'll get exhausted. I'll just wear myself out, right? Many people, we think that way. But it's not true. This mind and heart of ours is inexhaustible and actually gets stronger, right? When it's used in this selfless way. Right? So, very powerful. Now, I made a commitment that I'd end by 8:30. So, for those of you who are going to, there's something on at 9 o'clock I think people want to access. Having spent these last hour and a half or so with Vimalakirti and this wisdom, it'll be interesting turning on the TV tonight, right? And listening to the dialogue and the interaction. We've just been exposed to, the highest wisdom and understanding and altruistic mind and intelligence and, the real use of this intelligent mind we have. And depending on what unfolds tonight, just think about, what am I seeing here? What are people doing with this mind, this pure heart? What are they turning it into? Yeah, so very instructive. Stay open. Stay wise. Don't be fooled. Good, so good night, everybody. And we will continue. So please, I'll send out some questions like I did last time, just to get you reflecting, encourage you to read on your own. I'm just pulling out parts. I've said enough. Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening. Let me share the merit. Whatever benefit has come to us this evening from our study of the Vimalakirti Sutra, may it be shared equally with all whom we encounter, whether near or far away, and may its effects ripple continuously to aid in the healing and transformation of this world. Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening.